Abilene's main street was thick with dust that morning, the pale, powdery kind that rose off the cattle trail and settled over everything like a second skin, coating windowsills and water troughs and painted shop signs until the whole town looked like it had been left too long in the sun. I still think about that morning. I think about it the way you think about the exact second before a lamp falls, the stillness just before everything changes. Margaret Doyle was standing on the front step of Kellerman's Dry Goods, a bolt of blue cotton tucked under her arm, when the man came around the far corner of Cedar Street. She almost didn't look up, but some pull she couldn't name made her lift her eyes to the street, and then she stopped breathing. He walked the way Robert Hale had always walked, unhurried, shoulders square, weight shifted just slightly to the left, the old cavalry habit from a decade of riding. His hair had gone the color of creek gravel. There was a beard she didn't recognize, and a canvas coat that had seen too many hard winters. But the walk, the shoulders, the way his head turned, reading the street the way a man reads a place he's been away from too long. Her hand went to her chest before her mind caught up. Her fingers found the edge of folded paper through the fabric of her dress, the paper she had carried every single day for 6 years. The paper that had told her he was never coming back. He was 20 yards away and hadn't seen her yet. Margaret stood on that step and could not move, because the man crossing the dust of Cedar Street alive, walking, real as the planks beneath her feet, was Robert Hale. And Robert Hale had been dead for 3 years. To understand what that morning meant, to understand why Margaret's hand was shaking and why the bolt of cotton slipped from under her arm and she didn't even look down, you have to go back 6 years. Back to a telegram, a name on paper, and the way a single message can split a life cleanly in two. The before and the after. Margaret had come to Abilene in the spring of 1873, when the Chisholm Trail was still pouring longhorns through the county at 3,000 head a week, and the town was loud enough at night that you could hear cattle lowing from the edge of town, a low, endless sound, like the land itself was restless. She had come with her Aunt Clara Baines, who ran the seamstress shop on Cedar Street, and she had stayed because Abilene felt, in a way she hadn't expected, like a place she could breathe in. She had met Robert Hale at Clara's shop. He had come in to have a coat button replaced, a domestic errand for a man of his particular stillness. He was 28, a former cavalry scout working as assistant to the county land assessor, with dark hair and green eyes and a manner so unhurried it sometimes looked like indifference, until you paid attention long enough to realize it was the opposite. He was paying attention to everything, all the time, and the stillness was how he managed it. They had walked out together for 2 years. Margaret was not a woman given to romantic notions. She had long ago decided a solid, honest understanding was worth more than the breathless kind novels specialized in. But Robert Hale had a way of listening, as if whatever she was saying was the only thing happening in the world that undid her practicality every single time. In the spring of 1875, Robert took a survey assignment in the Indian Territory. 3 months, mapping water claims along the Cimarron River for the Territorial Land Office. He kissed her goodbye on the steps of Clara's shop and rode south on a Tuesday morning in April. His letter from Caldwell arrived on schedule. After that, nothing. In those same early weeks of May 1875, before the silence fell, Gerald Harmon was sitting in the back office of the Topeka Land and Timber Association, his boots resting on a polished mahogany desk that cost more than a frontier family earned in 2 years. Harmon was 48, with heavy jowls, pale calculating eyes, and a habit of turning a heavy silver ring around his thumb whenever he was measuring a man's price. Across the desk stood Curtis Pruitt, thin and sweating despite the cool morning air, holding a stack of territorial survey maps. Harmon didn't look up immediately. He let the silence stretch, the way men who hold mortgage papers like to do. When he finally looked up, his voice was smooth as oiled leather. "The Smoky Hill River claims are flagged," Harmon said softly, tapping a finger on a county assessor report signed by Robert Hale. "This young assistant assessor, Hale, fancies himself an honest man. He thinks a line drawn on paper by a surveyor is sacred." Harmon leaned forward, his heavy hands resting flat on the mahogany. An honest man in the way of 3,000 acres of prime timber and water rights is not an obstacle, Pruitt. He is merely an accounting error waiting to be corrected. If hail goes south to the Cimarron, make sure any word coming back passes through your key first. Every telegram, every letter, $40 now, and 50 more when the claim's clear. Pruitt hesitated for a single second, looking at the two $20 gold pieces Harmon slid across the wood before reaching out and taking them. The telegram came on a Wednesday in late June, 6 weeks after Robert's last letter. It arrived at the Western Union office on First Street, a quarter page of yellow paper, printed in clean block letters, sender listed as R. Hale, Caldwell, Kansas. The message read in its entirety, "Not coming back. Forgive me. Do not wait." Margaret read it, standing at the counter with Amos Briggs, the operator, watching her with the careful expression of a man who has handed people bad news before and knows there is nothing useful to say. She read it twice. She folded it along the crease Amos had made, put it in the pocket of her apron, thanked Amos for his trouble, and walked back to Clara's shop and went on with the afternoon's mending. She did not cry until after supper, and even then she did it quietly, in her room privately, without asking anyone else to carry the weight. The practical version of the story was simple enough. A man had changed his mind. Men changed their minds. The territory was full of men who had ridden away from their obligations and found it easier to stay gone. She was 31 years old. She had a skill, an income, and a town that had need of her. She was going to be all right. She kept the telegram. This was the thing she couldn't explain. She kept it in her apron pocket for a month, then moved it to the tin box beside her sewing lamp. When she accepted she could not throw it away, she put it in the flat breast pocket of her everyday dress and simply carried it the way you carry a stone you picked up for no reason and then can't put down. By the time 6 years were gone, she knew she would carry it until something gave her a reason not to. She did not know, in those 6 years, that on the same Wednesday in late June 1875, the Western Union office in Caldwell had received 2 separate messages from the survey camp. The first arrived in the afternoon. Margaret Doyle, Abilene, stop injured, stop confined to doctor, stop coming home, soon, stop love R. Hale. This message had never been delivered. The second, the one she received, was sent 4 hours later by a man named Curtis Pruitt, who had listed himself simply as R. Hale. The accident on the Cimarron was a simple thing, as serious accidents often are. A river crossing in high water, a horse that lost its footing, Robert thrown against a submerged limestone shelf with enough force to shatter 2 ribs and break his left arm. He was carried to Caldwell, where a doctor set the arm, strapped the ribs, and told him he was going to be in bed 6 weeks. From the rooming house 2 days later, he sent his telegram. He was not alarmed by the absence of a reply. Mail was slow, lines intermittent. He waited, healed, wrote 2 letters south with the weekly stage. When he could write again, he went back to the survey party and finished the job, sending a 3rd letter from Caldwell when the survey closed. Nothing came back. He rode north to Abilene in October and found, because small towns carry news the way water carries silt, that Margaret Doyle had received a telegram in June saying he was not coming back and had been told by the message itself not to wait. He went to the Western Union office. Amos Briggs showed him the entry for June 23, 1875. The message there in Briggs's neat hand, sender listed as R. Hale, Caldwell. Robert asked to see the incoming wire log from that date. Briggs said the raw log for that period had been damaged in the spring flooding and was no longer available. He said it with the specific, careful stillness of a man who has rehearsed saying it. Robert left the office. He did not go to see Margaret. 4 days later, the survey company offered him a new assignment, Colorado, winter start, good money, and he took it, because the alternative was to stand before a woman who had received a message in his name telling her not to wait, with no proof to counter it. Only his word against black ink on yellow paper. He spent 6 years moving through Colorado, Wyoming, and back through Kansas, writing it all down not for anyone, but for himself, the way a careful man catalogs what he knows while waiting for the piece that makes the whole picture clear. Curtis Pruitt was 43 years old and dying of a lung sickness, and as men sometimes do when the end becomes specific and near, he had developed an overwhelming need to say the things he had kept quiet for 20 years. He was thin and yellow-skinned, with careful eyes and hands that shook slightly, a former telegraph operator in Caldwell, now living out his final season in a Dodge City rooming house. He recognized Robert Hale in the land office cook shack on a cold December evening and asked to speak with him over supper. Robert had not recognized him. Curtis had always been a background figure, a man who made himself invisible, which was a professional skill. He told Robert, with the flat, exhausted delivery of a man who no longer has energy to dress things up, exactly what he had done. In June of 1875, Curtis had been employed as the Caldwell telegraph operator and simultaneously, in an unregistered capacity, by a land speculator named Gerald Harmon from Topeka. Harmon had been attempting to acquire water rights to 3 sections of land on the Smoky Hill Riverland that Robert, as assistant county assessor, had flagged as improperly filed 6 weeks before the survey began. Harmon paid Curtis $40 to intercept any outgoing messages from Robert during his incapacitation and replace them, where necessary, with alternatives. Robert's first message telling Margaret he was injured and coming home soon had been destroyed. The second, which Curtis composed and sent in Robert's name, was designed to remove Margaret as a reason for Robert to hurry back and to reinforce the impression that he had voluntarily abandoned his position in Abilene. Harmon's scheme ultimately collapsed when the Territorial Review Board flagged the claims independently. But by then, the damage to Robert and Margaret was already done. Curtis gave Robert a copy of the original intercepted message, kept for 6 years in the back of an old survey notebook. The paper was yellow and brittle, but still entirely legible. Robert held it in his hands for a long time. Then, he put it in his coat pocket, thanked Curtis for his supper, and walked out into the cold Dodge City night. He stood under the winter stars, thinking about 6 years and a woman and one question: whether the truth, arriving this late, was a gift or only a different kind of wound. He rode to Abilene anyway, because knowing and saying nothing was a thing he found he could not live with. He had not planned to walk down Cedar Street. He meant to go directly to the county land office, old habit, but the roads into town came the way they always had, and Cedar Street was the natural approach from the south, and his mind was somewhere else when he looked up and saw the sign above Kellerman's Dry Goods and realized, with a jolt that went through him like cold water, exactly where he was. He stopped. He looked at the step. Margaret Doyle was standing on it. He recognized her the way you recognize a place you've dreamed about for years in stages, each detail confirming the one before until the whole picture assembled, and there was no doubt. She was 37 now, hair pinned differently, but the posture was the same, the particular straightness of a woman who had decided a long time ago to carry her own weight without leaning. The bolt of cotton was on the boardwalk at her feet. She was not looking at it. She was looking at him. He had not prepared for this moment. He had prepared for a conversation, a meeting at a time of his choosing, the careful delivery of information he had spent 4 months organizing. He had not prepared for 10 yards of open air and her face wearing the exact expression he had imagined in the worst of his 6 years that she might have when she saw him. He put his hand in his coat pocket where the notebook page was folded and held it without taking it out. Margaret came down the step. She moved the way she always moved, without hurry, with deliberateness. She crossed Cedar Street in full sight of whoever was watching, without concern for any of them, and stopped 2 feet in front of him. She said, "You are not a ghost," he said. "No. I was told you were dead 2 years ago. The county posted a death record, a land office accident in Wyoming." He had not known about the death record. He felt the ground shift the same way it had on this same street 6 years ago, and understood that Harmon had been more thorough than he'd realized. "That record is false," he said. "I can see that," said Margaret. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. She reached into the pocket of her dress and took out a piece of paper folded soft with age, fold lines worn almost through, and held it between them without opening it. "Is this yours?" she asked. They did not have the conversation on Cedar Street. A practical woman does not stand in the middle of the main road having the most important conversation of her life while the feed store watches from the opposite boardwalk. She picked up the cotton bolt and told Robert Hale, in a level voice, to come with her. She led him upstairs, 2 small, clean rooms, a sewing table under the south window, the afternoon light falling across it in a long, dusty bar, and in the corner, the tin box she had kept beside her sewing lamp since 1875. She placed the folded telegram on the table. "Sit if you want," she said, and went to fill the kettle. Robert sat. He put his hat on his knee and looked at the telegram, his name in Amos Briggs's hand. The words, "Not coming back. Forgive me, do not wait," as clear and final as the day they had been printed. He had seen a copy of this message before, in the Caldwell wire log, but he had never seen this one, the original Margaret had carried for 6 years. Something about seeing it here, on this table, made the weight of what it had cost her settle into him in a way he hadn't been prepared for. He took the notebook page from his coat pocket, unfolded it, and placed it beside the telegram. Margaret turned from the washstand. She came to the table and stood over both pieces of paper, not touching, just looking, with the careful attention she gave a seam she was about to cut. The message on the notebook page was in different handwriting. The wording was entirely different. The date was the same, June 23rd, 1875. She read it twice. Then she put her hands flat on the table and looked at the wall above the stove. Robert watched her absorb it and said nothing, because there was nothing useful he could add to what the paper was already telling her. "Where did you get this?" she said finally. He told her. Curtis Pruitt, Dodge City, the $40, Gerald Harmon and the water rights scheme, the 6 years moving through the territory believing she had received his message and chosen not to answer. He told it plainly, without asking her to feel any particular way before she'd worked out how she actually felt. When he finished, the kettle had boiled. She made the tea and sat across the table from him, and they looked at each other for the first time without the distance of Cedar Street between them. "You thought I hadn't answered," she said. "Yes. And I thought you'd made your choice and ridden away." "Yes." She looked at the 2 pieces of paper. 6 years, she said, not angrily, as a fact, stated plainly. 6 years, he agreed. The coal stove ticked. Outside, Abilene went on, as it always did, hooves and voices and the distant, eternal lowing of herds moving north. Margaret wrapped both hands around her teacup, looked at the man across the table, and said nothing for a long time, and he let her. "I am glad you're not dead," Margaret said. "I want you to know I mean that entirely and without complication." "I know," he said, "but I need you to understand something." She set the teacup down. 6 years is not a small thing. I built something in those years. I learned how to be alone without being lonely, and that took me 3 years and cost me more than I'm going to describe right now. I have a life here that is steady and mine, and I do not say that to wound you. I say it because you deserve an honest account of where I am. Robert did not look away. "I'm not here to ask you to give that up. I'm not here with a plan that requires you to rearrange yourself for my benefit. I came because you deserve to know the truth, and because—" He stopped. He looked at his hat on his knee, then back at her. "Because I've been telling myself for 6 years that I came back, and there was nothing left to come back to. I needed to know if that was actually true, or just what I'd decided was easier to believe. This," Margaret told me later, "was the moment that undid her, not the proof on the table, not the 6 years accounted for, but this, the honesty of a man admitting he had let himself believe something easier, because the truth was more than he knew how to face. It wasn't true," she said. "There was something left. I just didn't know you'd tried to come back to it." They sat with that for a while. The tea went cold. Neither of them moved. "I can't give you the 6 years back," Robert said eventually. "No," said Margaret, "nobody can do that. What I can do if you want it, and only if you want it, is be honest with you about what I have now and what I can offer, and let you decide what that's worth." He paused. "I'm 51 years old. I have a survey license and some money put by. I'm not offering you anything spectacular, but I'm done moving. I've been done moving for a long time. I just didn't have a reason to stop." Margaret looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Then she said, "You need to understand that I don't forgive easily. Not because I am hard, because I take it seriously." "I know," he said. "I wouldn't have come back if I thought you didn't." Margaret understood before Robert did that the truth demands completion. She picked up both pieces of paper from the table, put them in her apron pocket together for the first time, and told Robert there was something she needed to do before anything else happened between them. She needed to go to the Western Union office on First Street. Amos Briggs was 45 that spring, a compact and careful man who had run the Abilene telegraph office since the early cattle trade days. By most accounts, he was honest and reliable. In the specific case of June 23, 1875, that reliability had functioned as something else. Margaret walked in with Robert at her shoulder and put both pieces of paper on the counter in front of Amos Briggs. She said nothing because she understood that silence was often more efficient than accusation. Briggs looked at the papers. He was still for a moment the same careful, deciding stillness Robert had read in this office 6 years ago. Then he looked up at Robert. "You came back?" he said. "I came back," Robert said. Briggs looked at Margaret. She watched him with the direct, patient gaze of a woman who has had 6 years to arrive at this conversation and is not in any hurry now that she's here. He let out a slow breath, reached under the counter, brought up the green-bound logbook, and opened it to the entry for June 23, 1875. From between the back binding and the leather cover, he took out a single folded piece of paper and placed it on the counter. Robert's original transcribed message. Amos Briggs had kept it. "Pruitt came to me directly," Briggs said. "He had Harmon's authorization in writing and $40 for the intercept. I was going to refuse him." He looked at the paper. "Then he showed me the Harmon authorization, and I realized Harmon had connections to 3 of my largest business clients in the county. And He stopped. "I made a decision I knew was wrong when I made it. I've known that for 6 years. The county records show Robert dead," Margaret said. "A Wyoming land office accident, 1878. Briggs's jaw tightened. "That came from Harmon, too. I had no part in the death record. When I heard about it, I understood he was protecting a longer play. Your flag on those Smoky Hill claims went up the chain further than Harmon anticipated. A living Robert Hale showing up to finish what he'd started was a complication. A dead one wasn't," Robert said quietly. "Is Harmon still in Topeka?" Briggs said, "He is." Sheriff Calloway was a heavy-set man of 55, with a gray mustache and the patiently exhausted expression of a lawman who had stopped being surprised by what people do to each other. He listened to what Robert and Margaret laid out on his desk, the 2 telegrams, Briggs's original transcription, Briggs's written statement with the attention of a man taking inventory. "False death record on a county file is criminal," Calloway said. "Telegraph tampering for material gain is criminal. Wire fraud involving the federal lines goes up to the district court. Land scheme specifics go to the Territorial Review Board." He set down the papers. "Briggs is willing to testify?" "He signed the statement of his own initiative," Margaret said. "He'd like to be treated as a cooperating witness rather than a co-defendant." Calloway studied her. "You've thought this through." "I've had the morning," she said. "There was, in the end, enough. Federal wire fraud charges were filed against Gerald Harmon in August of 1881. The false death record added criminal impersonation of a government document. Harmon's Smoky Hill land holdings went under federal review for the second time, this time with the benefit of Robert Hale's original assessment documentation, which Robert had kept in meticulous order through every year of his travels. Harmon was found guilty on 3 counts before the year was out and served a federal sentence in Leavenworth. The water rights went back to the county, and from there, through proper filing, to the families who had originally claimed them. Curtis Pruitt's testimony was submitted in written form given his physical condition. He died in January of 1882, easier than he had lived. Robert Hale never said what he thought about this. Some things a man keeps. Robert Hale took a room at the Commercial Hotel on 2nd Street. He ate his meals at the Drover's Rest on the corner. He did not press Margaret for anything she hadn't offered. He had told her he was done moving, and this was the first proof of it. He stayed still. He did not manufacture reasons to appear at her door. He did not fill silence with reassurances she hadn't asked for. He let Abilene be a small town and trusted that small towns do the work of proximity without anyone having to engineer it. He was right about this. Margaret lived 40 yards from the hotel. Their paths crossed with the natural frequency of 2 people in a town of 4,000 who move through the same streets. When they met, they talked first about the case, about Calloway's wires and Harmon's arraignment. Then, as those topics exhausted themselves, about other things. About the town and what it had become since the cattle trade quieted. About books Margaret read seriously, and Robert had carried books through the territory the way other men carried whiskey, for the same fundamental reason of needing something to put between yourself and the long, empty evenings. 3 weeks after Robert's return, Margaret brought him a book. She had finished a novel about a man who took a very long time to understand something obvious. She told him she expected a report when he was done. He returned it 4 days later with a note reading, "The man in this book took 30 years. I am already ahead of schedule." Margaret read it at the sewing table with the afternoon light across it, folded it carefully, and put it in her apron pocket alongside the 2 telegrams, and went on with the afternoon's work. It was Margaret who sent the telegram. Robert told me this later with the quiet satisfaction of a man surprised by something that cost him nothing, which is the best kind of surprise. She sent it from the Western Union office on First Street, from Amos Briggs's counter. She had forgiven Briggs in the careful, specific, serious way she forgave things, meaning she said so directly, and then stopped discussing it. The message was addressed to the Commercial Hotel on 2nd Street, a distance of approximately 1 city block. It read, "Dinner Sunday, 6 o'clock. Do not bring anything." Emp Robert sent back, "Confirmed. R." The dinner was not spectacular by any measure a person planning a romantic occasion would recognize. It was a roasted chicken and cornbread, and the last jar of apple butter from the previous fall, and a pot of very good coffee, served at the small table under the south window, while the spring evening settled over Abilene, and the street below went quiet with the particular quiet of a cattle town on a Sunday when the week's work is finished and the next week hasn't started yet. He did not ask her anything that night. He ate the dinner she had made and talked about the book and listened to her talk about the town and the seasons. And he thought, though, he did not say this until much later, that there were men who spent their entire lives looking for a room with a particular quality of peace in it, and some found it and didn't know what to do with it. And he was going to be careful not to be that man. He walked back to the hotel in the dark, down Cedar Street, past the step where Margaret had been standing 6 years ago and again this morning. He stopped on that step for a moment, looked at the street and the dark sky above the shop fronts and the faint glow of kerosene lamps in the upper windows, and felt for the first time in 6 years that he was somewhere he was supposed to be. 6 weeks later, Robert Hale came back to the shop on Cedar Street and stood on the step and waited. He had not rehearsed what he was going to say. He had spent enough of his life saying rehearsed things that turned out to be unnecessary. Margaret came to the door in her work apron, a threaded needle in her hand, and looked at her with the level, curious expression she gave most things until she had worked out what they were. He said, "I have a proposal. It is not a complicated one." She waited. "I have been offered a position with the Kansas Territorial Land Office Senior Assessor, based in Abilene, no travel requirement. The job is mine if I want it. I want it." He looked at her directly. "I want to stay in this town. I want if you're willing to find out what we would have been if the last 6 years had gone differently. Not to pretend those years didn't happen, just to find out what comes after them." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Her silences were never uncertainty, they were consideration, which is a different thing entirely. "You understand," she said finally, "that I'm going to be entirely myself. I'm not going to be easier to be around, simply because the circumstances are romantic. I am particular about how I keep my house, and I do not like to be interrupted when I'm working, and I have opinions about most things, and I share them, whether or not they've been requested." "Yes," he said, "and you understand that I have forgiven you for the 6 years, because none of them were your fault, but I have not finished being sad about them, and there will be days when that sadness will be present in the room without explanation." "Yes," he said, "I have some of those days myself." She considered this. She looked at the needle in her hand. Then she looked back at him and said, with the plain, direct honesty that had been the thing he'd loved most about her at 28 and had not stopped loving through any of the years between, "Then yes, Robert, I want to find out." He put his hand in his coat pocket. He had 2 things in there, his survey license and a plain gold ring he had bought from the jeweler on 2nd Street Premature, and he knew it, and he had bought it anyway. the way a careful man prepays for something he intends to earn. He left the ring in his pocket. This was not the moment for it. This was the moment that comes before the one where the door opens, and it was enough, more than enough. They were married in September of 1881 at the small Presbyterian church on Prairie Street, in a ceremony attended by Amos Briggs and Sheriff Calloway and the woman who ran the millinery next door to Kellerman's, who had been following the whole business with an interest she made no effort to conceal. Robert wore a new coat. Margaret wore a dress she had made herself dark blue, careful seam work at the wrists and collar. Calloway gave a brief toast at the supper after, noting that in 30 years of frontier law he had handled a great deal of dishonesty and very little of its undoing, and that putting a wrong right was, in his experience, a rarer and harder thing than committing one, and that these two people had done it, and he thought that was worth saying out loud. Robert accepted the position with the Kansas Territorial Land Office. Margaret continued the seamstress shop. She was and remained particular about her house and her work and her opinions, all of which she expressed without modification for any domestic occasion. Robert, who had spent 6 years wanting nothing more specific than somewhere to be still, found this arrangement so entirely suited to his temperament that he said so out loud once, and Margaret told him she was glad, but that he needn't keep mentioning it, and he agreed. In the Abilene County record from the summer of 1882, there's a notation correcting Robert Hale's death record filed by Calloway's office with characteristic efficiency, noting simply that the record dated 1878 was fraudulent and hereby rescinded. It is a very undramatic document, the kind that gets filed and rarely looked at again. Margaret kept a copy of it in the tin box beside her sewing lamp, alongside 2 telegrams and a note reading, "The man in this book took 30 years. I am already ahead of schedule." On a warm evening in May of 1882, Robert Hale sat on the porch of the house they had taken on the south end of Cedar Street and watched the last of the spring light go amber across the Kansas plain. Margaret came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat in the chair beside him, and they didn't say much because there was nothing that needed saying. The plain was wide and the evening was long, and somewhere in the distance you could still hear cattle moving north on the trail, the low, steady sound of the country going about its ordinary, enormous business. Robert put his hand on the arm of her chair, not on her hand, just on the arm of the chair, close enough to mean something, far enough to be a choice. Margaret wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and looked at the plain. They sat that way until the light was gone, and then a little while after that, because the dark was warm and neither of them was in any hurry, and they had, at last, nowhere better to be. Thank you for being here today. If this story held you think about what Robert and Margaret chose to do when the truth finally arrived, years too late and carrying 6 years of silence behind it. They did not treat it as a wound to nurse, they treated it as a door to walk through. There is something in their story worth carrying forward, that honesty arriving late is still honesty. The time cannot be given back, but something true and solid can still be built from the place where you are, and that the kind of peace worth having is the kind 2 plain and honest people make for themselves on an ordinary porch, on an ordinary evening, with no audience and nowhere else they'd rather be. Consider subscribing so you don't miss the next story. Until then, keep the light on the porch.